Hi guys, tonight we're going to talk about adaptations and the characteristics of life. Now because this PBL is all about plants, the only type of adaptations we're going to talk about are the plant adaptations. So do not forget you need to take Cornell notes on this, which means you need to go ahead and write your off-centered I, and do not forget your summary at the end. Also, if I put anything in a different color or I tell you at a certain point to stop and do this, make sure that you can pause it so you have plenty of time. So let's talk about inherited characteristics. Why do tigers have stripes? Why are bullfrogs green on the back and then black and white on the belly? Why do giraffes have long necks? Why do geese learn to fly? Why do water lilies float? Why do some plants bear food? Well, the answer to all of these inherited characteristics is they are adaptations. The definition of an adaptation, and I want you to write this down, is it is an inherited characteristic that helps an organism to survive long enough to reproduce more successfully in a changing environment, and so that it can be structural or behavioral. Now, the whole reason of life is the goal is to reproduce. Everything wants to live long enough to reproduce to pass on its genetic material. From humans all the way to even bacterium, the whole goal in life is to pass on your DNA, and you do that through reproduction. So adaptations are changes that organisms make to help them to better fit into their environment. Now, we're mainly going to focus on structural structural adaptations, but we will talk about a few behavioral. And yes, even plants have behavioral adaptations. So, plant adaptations. All living things adapt, no matter what kingdom you belong in. Animals are not the only organisms to adapt. So, let's talk about structural plant adaptation. And please write this in your journal. When we say structure, we mean the adaptations of the body. Some examples are plants create these things called holdfast, which allow them, just like it sounds, to hold or anchor themselves into a situation or into the ground or into a spot, because plants can't get up and walk away. So they need to really anchor themselves, especially if they find themselves in a spot that is very productive in sunlight and water. Another adaptation that plants have done is empty space for water storage, which we call this the xylem. They can also help to catch animals for minerals. They can become very tall, therefore the tallest tree gets the most photosynthesis. They can be very hardy, so they can withstand very extreme conditions. Thorns for protection, flexibility so that they will not snap in strong winds or if they get bent, and flotation devices so that they can float on top of the water and still get photosynthesis or perform photosynthesis. So please write the definition of structural adaptations down and just write a couple. You don't have to write all of them, but definitely write a few examples. The second way that plants can adapt are seeds. All seeds have adaptations to better enable them to survive long enough to plant themselves and grow. Because they do not produce like miniature versions of themselves like humans or most mammals do, a seed is in a dormant state. And that is an adaptation to allow it to live long enough so that once it does find itself in a situation where it is receiving enough water and minerals to break through to perform photosynthesis, then a plant can start to grow and form. Some other adaptations are protection. This is thorns, bad taste, if they're poisonous, like poison ivy, poison oak, nightlock, all that kind of stuff. Spikes to protect animals from eating them. And then also obtaining food. As you know, plants, which we call producers or autotrophs, make their own food through photosynthesis. And they do this through the green chlorophyll in the pigment through their chloroplasts in their leaves. So therefore, the larger the leaves, the more sun that they can capture. You probably realized this when you were talking about tropical plants. They tend to have very big, broad, wide leaves. This allows them to gather more photosynthesis for more food. So then why don't cactus have really big, broad leaves? They live in the desert and they have plenty of sunlight. But that's a separate adaptation to account for the lack of water. So here are some pictures of some plants and their adaptations. Can you see a couple and figure out how they have adapted to fit their environment? Here's a bougainvillea. It is a beautiful tropical plant that can also survive in the desert. Bougainvillea is a vine, which means when it's growing, it is very flexible and it can climb up the body of another structure. This allows it to reach to the top and get a lot of photosynthesis. As it matures, the trunk will harden into a very strong, thorny, protective structure so that it cannot be chopped down, chewed on, broken down, or eaten. So this plant has many adaptations. It's flexible when it's young. It has protection when it's older. It grows and clings so it can climb and get a lot of photosynthesis. Seeds are the baby plants. They are formed when pollen fertilizes the egg, and whenever we have fruit that comes from plants, that was formed to protect the seed. So when you eat an apple, and there's seeds inside. Oranges, there's seeds inside. It also helps provide them with a lot of water. Think of a dandelion. Dandelions pop up with all their seeds very loose, and what do? I know my daughter loves to grab dandelions and blow them all across the yard, and the seeds have adapted so that they can catch the air and float very easily and disperse themselves in a large amount of quantity areas. Every time she does that, in my head I sit there and think, that's a weed, and now you've just blown weed seeds all over my yard. But they're fun, and so that is a great plant adaptation. So I want you to look at all the structure adaptations below, and I want you to pick out a couple. So let's start with the cactus. We know that cacti are known for growing in the desert. And what is the desert famous for? Lack of water. We know they have plenty of sunlight, so why don't they have big, broad green leaves like some of the plants in the tropical areas do? Well, because they have such a lack of water that transpiration, which is the loss of water through a plant, would occur. Cactus cannot afford to lose water at any time. So they've created these spines that are not green to help with water loss. They also have a very dense, fleshy inner material, which allows them to store large amounts of water inside the body, so if they have to go for long periods. Palm trees, for example. Palm trees are some great adapters. They can live on every continent except Antarctica, and they are made to live on the beach and survive strong winds such as hurricanes. Whenever a palm tree can sense strong winds occurring, it will automatically start to drop all its leaves. That time when the storm actually gets there, it would not have all these long branches that could help it to get uproot or snapped. It's just one long skinny pole moving in the wind and able to bend a lot easier. Dandelions we talked about. Water lilies. Water lilies have adapted because they are able to float on top of water. So they have all this water storage that they can have to their use, and then float on top so they can get lots of photosynthesis. The Venus flytrap, it has adapted because it grew in an area where there were not a lot of minerals or nutrients in the soil. And we know through photosynthesis that plants not only need food, light, carbon dioxide, but they need minerals to grow. So the Venus flytrap has adapted by creating the structure to allow it to consume insects and arachnids to help get the minerals that it needs. It has all these tiny little hairs inside, and once an insect triggers those hairs, the hatch will close within a couple of seconds, and it secretes an acid that completely liquefies the animal inside, and then it just absorbs it. And trees changing colors. Now that autumn is approaching, we're going to start to see some beautiful colors. What happens is plants know that the winter is coming. And as winter is coming, they know the days are going to get shorter and they're not going to be able to do enough photosynthesis to survive. So they do all of their growing in the summer. Once they can sense the cooler temperatures coming on and the lack of sunlight, all the chlorophyll pigment dies. This is what allows us to start to see the other pigments to show, the beautiful xanthophyll, the carotene, the red, the yellow, the orange, and then the leaves fall off. and they go dormant in the winter because there's not a lot of sunlight and there's not a lot of water. And then once the temperatures start warming up and the days become longer again, the leaves will start to regrow. So seed adaptations. For plants to survive, seeds have to be dispersed away from a parent plant. And there are many ways that they can do this. They can create devices that allow them to be caught by the wind. They can make burrs or be real sticky that allow them to be caught in animals' fur and carried off from one place to another. They can have a flotation device in them to allow them to float down streams and creeks and lakes and rivers. They can have a busting technique, which we know living in East Texas with all the pine trees when everything starts to get yellow. And then they can also be food that we as humans or other animals eat, and the seeds go through our digestive system. And once they go through our digestive system, the seeds are like marked up enough through the acids that once they come out in our feces, they're able to start to germinate, which means to grow. So here are the same ones we talked about, carried by wind, through parachute and wings, carried by animals' fur, float, eaten by animals, or they could be propelled, like the dandelion. Look at the seeds below and tell me, can you name some of the ways that they are dispersed? Obviously, how do you think a dandelion is? Through wind, or my daughter when she likes to blow on them. Also, the helicopter, we can see those in maples and pine trees. This one's an acorn is getting eaten by a squirrel. Coconuts also get eaten by us. These are burrs that can get trapped in our clothes, socks, and animals' fur. Now, plants also have behavior. Not only do they have structural, but they also have behavioral to help them survive in their environment. So this is where we're going to kind of go into tropism. And we're going to do a lot of cool things with tropism. The definition, and I need you to write this down, of tropism is the movement of a plant towards or away from a stimulus. Towards is called positive, and away is called negative. Oh my gosh. So like Avery talked about the other day in class, when phototropism is a plant moving towards the light, that would be positive phototropism. And when a plant moves away from the light because it's getting too much, that would be negative phototropism. But just tropism, which is the root of the word, just means the plant is moving towards a stimuli. So another plant adaptation is that they can go dormant, which is a state of rest or inactivity. And as the colors change, and we talked about the leaves falling off, once all the trees are bare and ugly and gray in the winter, they're in dormant. Fall is the time of the year when the plants are preparing for that. They're dropping all their seeds. They're putting all the seeds they can on the ground so that new plants can be formed in the spring. Seasonal changes in trees to survive winter. All trees lose their leaves and at some point, and they stop taking in water so that xylophone will not freeze. Now remember that xylem is that hollow storage center we talked about in the structure of the plant, mainly in the stalk and the stems. If they have water in them, which they use to store the water, if it gets below freezing, that xylophone will freeze, and that's like, just think about you freezing from the inside out. It will kill a plant. Trees like pines and hollies lose their leaves throughout the year. These are called evergreens. That's where we're going to stop today. So I hope you've seen some good adaptations in plants, especially with the internal structures like the xylem and all that. And we are going to start talking about geotropism. So if you need to rewind this video at any time, please do so. I will be checking your core notes on Monday to make sure that you have everything that you need. Bye.